is a bit of a digression from the story about Joseph, and it's very, very interesting. And so today's study starts in Genesis chapter 38, verses 1 through 11 is where we will start. Just a quick review. We saw that Joseph was captured by his brothers and thrown into a pit, sold to the Midianites, Ishmaelites, aka same thing as far as the Hebrew scholars can tell, and sold to Egypt. And then the story breaks, and we get a little bit of a digression here about something that happens to Judah when all of this is going on. And there, I believe, is some strong prophetic significance to this section. If you've read it this week, I hope that you have, that you've done your homework, and maybe you looked at some commentary or something, you probably saw some very interesting things. And so we're going to try to bring these out as we take a look at this to see what we come up with. And so let's start here. It says, "And it comes about that Judah is going down from his brothers and is turning aside to a man, an Adulamite, and his name is Hira. And Judah sees there the daughter of a man of the Canaanites, and his name is Shua. And he takes her and goes into her. And she conceives and bears a son, and she calls his name or And she conceives again another son, and calls his name Onan. And again she bears a third son, and calls his name Shelah. And she is in Chezib when she bears them. And Judah gets a wife for his firstborn, and her name is Tamar. And Judah's firstborn, is evil in the eyes of Yehovah, and Yehovah puts him to death. And Judah says to Onan, his second-born son, Come to your brother's wife, and wed her, your brother's widow, and raise seed for your brother. And Onan considers that the seed will not be his. And it happens when he goes into his brother's wife that he spills the seed on the earth to avoid giving seed to his brother. This is evil in the eyes of Yehovah, and he put him to death also. And Judah says to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, Dwell as a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown, for he thinks he also will die as his brothers. And Tamar dwells in her father's house." Very interesting and auspicious to be beginning to this little digression that just breaks off completely of the story of Joseph. And it's a mystery. It's a bit of a mystery. Considering the timing, if we consider the timing of this story in relation to the other events, what do you think that we might infer from this? Consider that Joseph has been sold out by his brothers and has been taken captive to Egypt, and is gone from the family, and all of a sudden this happens to Judah. Do you see anything about the timing that is interesting? What do you think it might be? Any ideas?
Could be a punishment delegated by Yahweh to Yehuda for the behavior. He was taking part in the behavior with the other brothers of what they did to Joseph.
Good idea. Good idea. Some have suggested, and I'll just throw this out there for your consideration, that, and we can see if this unfolds and I'll ask you this question again at the end of this study tonight to see what your ideas might be as this story unfolds. To see, some have suggested that what is happening here in this story with Judah is a picture of what has happened with our brother Judah over the last 2,000 years. Interesting idea. keep it in mind as we move forward and you see some of the things that happen that might provide some clues, and see if it actually has any relevance or any validity. And you can share your ideas as this thing develops a little bit. In relation to that, if you look in your, and I know that many of you have these electronic Bibles that we're looking at. If you look at in the Hebrew where it says Judah goes down and bless you, and turns aside, okay, that's some very interesting language. And if you look at those Hebrew words,
Which verse are you talking about?
this is in verse 1. Judah is going down from his brothers and is turning aside. Going down and turning aside. If you look at the Hebrew in verse 1, it says Vayered. That means he went down. And this is to go down, descend, decline, sink down. It's an interesting word. Might have a word picture going on there. And then if you see that he turned aside, this is Vayit. And it says to stretch out, extend, spread out, pitch, turn, pervert, incline, bend, or bow. So something, I believe, is happening here, and those words were chosen for a reason. It seems to me that this is not like Judah just happened to go over here. We've got these special words. He goes down and turns aside. This is indicative of something, and I think this will begin to unfold a little bit more as we move forward. Do you think that there are any clues in these place names or people names that might give us insight?
Well, what do they mean?
No, does anybody know what they mean? Do they have their little?
Wasn't Shua salvation?
Shua is the root of salvation. Yeah, absolutely. Did you say that?
No, I didn't.
Who just
say
said
it,
that?
but
Oh, was that Keith?
I
I'm sorry. I couldn't tell where it was coming from.
Yeah.
Shua, yeah.
Is he a Canaanite?
Shua? Shua is a Canaanite, yes. So he sees that, notice interesting that this woman that Judah marries is not identified. It says that she marries the daughter of a man of the Canaanites, and his name is Shua. So this man of the Canaanites who has a daughter, his name is Shua. Well, Yahshua is Yehovah saves. So Shua would be saved,
Save.
redemption. So that's certainly an interesting comment there.
Why does it mean the other guy? The first guy that he was going to visit.
That he was going to visit an Adulamite.
Yeah.
Now, an Adulamite is Adulame, which is it literally means justice of the people.
Why does he
turn
why is that
aside?
included?
That's
it just doesn't seem relevant to the story. I just wondered.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And this Hira is.
Unless he was looking for something.
It's possible, yeah. What do you suggest?
Well, you said it had something to do with justice.
Well, justice of the people is what Adulama means. That's justice of the people.
He would turn himself in, selling off his brother.
Interesting. Now, if you look at Hira means a noble family. Shua is actually, according to this is Strong's. I have to look it up in another dictionary. This says that Shua is wealth. So we got a noble family, wealth. That's an interesting conglomeration of words there. Wealth, a noble family, and justice of the people.
Well, he was going to see a justice of the people, a noble family. But then it switches to the other thing.
Yeah, it does indeed. Which is just curious to keep these words in mind about what is going on here with these words. Tamar is palm tree.
Palm tree?
Tamar means palm tree. That's kind of interesting. And she got her firstborn son She called his name Er, which is awake. If you invert that, it's Ra. Resh Aleph, which is evil. That's an interesting thing.
Gur is what comes up on my CD player when it makes a mistake.
Error. So the firstborn son is awake. She conceived again and gave birth to another son named Onan, which means strong. Awake, strong, and had a third son called Shelah, which is petition. Strong, awake, petition. Anything that's kind of
Weird.
it's kind of weird and it doesn't seem readily apparent. But I just thought I'd bring out those names and see what you guys think of them, and maybe there was something there. We have justice of the people and a wealthy family and palm
What
trees.
is Shazib? He was at Shazib when she bore him.
Chazib? Yeah, Chazib.
Sounds foreign to me.
Sounds like they
Shalah.
put in for some reason.
Sounds like
Where is Chazib?
So that's right fast after his name.
Okay, yeah, so that's in verse 4.
No, it's 5.
Is it verse 5?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, it said in the Hebrew text it's slightly different. What does yours say?
Falsified.
Huh?
Falsified?
Falsified? Well, that's certainly interesting.
False. Yeah.
False. So we got all these names and their Hebrew meanings. Is anything coming to mind, and how you might stick these together, or anything coming out from that?
not yet.
Yeah, I couldn't. You know how I am. If I find something interesting, I'm just going to kick it out to you and see if anybody kicks it.
It's incredible.
Because I don't know.
That names, messy names.
If Kim means put in a pit and sold off to Egypt, would be if that was tied to Yeshua's death and resurrection, and then you look at the implications of that with this justice and
So was it Judah who gave up his signet and his staff?
Yeah, that's coming up here in just a moment. Yeah.
like there's
That's where it starts to get more interesting. I just wanted to pull out these names and see if you guys could.
I mean, because it's kind of like
Think of anything.
that covenant was kind of rejected when,
Which covenant?
well, you know, how at the temple, how the red cord never turned white again after that. It was
Yeah, we
almost
have an
like-
episode with a red cord coming
It
up
was
too.
almost like this deal we had, it's changed, you didn't go with me,
Mm,
or you didn't accept me,
yeah.
and then there's gotta be, you know, something's gonna happen because of that.
Yeah. Interesting
I think
concept.
In light of what we're seeing here, we see some important Hebraic concepts that are being revealed. The word zera,
Mhm.
seed, that's described. You see that in Genesis, the very beginning, the concept of seeds. Seeds of plants that
Right.
continue their line. And here we have the seed of Abraham, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob being continued, or not continued.
Or not continued. Yeah. Right. Right.
So this is real important. You'll see this word used constantly.
Right.
Are
So
those names most of the time being given after something happened, or was it right away during birth? Because many of the names, if you think about it, well, it makes sense when you read about like the red cord, what it meant, what is coming up later on. But did you say how do they know certain people's character, but later on reveals in their life? But is it just like premonition, or I don't know what the
I
right
think
word
it
is
must
for
be a
that.
prophecy type of
Prophecy,
thing,
yeah.
because it seems like, to me, when we're getting biblical names, the name is being applied to the person based upon something that's happening in the life of the mother or father at the time of conception, at the time of birth. Esau came out red, so they called him Edom, or Esau is red. heel grabber, Jacob. They call him Jacob, a heel grabber, because he came out holding on to his brother's heel. So there's
The
always
hairy one,
a hairy one, yeah. So you got
You must have werewolf syndrome. I think seriously. Like he come out hairy like that?
yes. That's
I mean,
Angie's
really?
brother has hair like that.
No, there's such a thing as that werewolf thing that he probably had that.
Yeah,
I
I've seen
think.
those babies that are covered with hair.
I mean, they say
On the
a
cover
lot
of National
hair.
Enquirer.
Yeah.
No, so it's interesting, and I just I know that there's something here. I looked at the Mishnah and the Talmud and all of the commentaries, and I didn't see anything related to these names. There was some interesting commentary from the Jewish sages, but they didn't say anything about the names either. I just thought I'd throw it out to you because I know you guys are a smart bunch, and usually when I can't figure it out, I'll just throw it out to you guys and you come up with something interesting. So I just thought I'd give it a try. Hold it in mind, maybe something will come up. So let's take a look at our next section. This is going to be Genesis 38, chapter 12 through 19. Now it says, as the days increase, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah is consoled and goes up to the shearers of his flock. And he and his shepherd Hira, the Adullamite, go to Timnah. And Tamar is informed, behold, your husband's father is going up to Timnah to shear his flock. And Tamar removes the garments of her widowhood and covers herself with a veil and is covering herself. And Tamar sat at the opening to the springs, which are on the way to Timnah, because she sees that Shelah, the third-born son of Judah, is grown up, but has not been given to her as a husband. And Judah sees her and believes her to be a prostitute, for she covers her face, and he did not recognize her. And turning into her, he speaks, may I come in to you? For he does not know that she is his daughter-in-law. And she replies, what will you give to me in order to come in to me? And Judah replies, I will send to you a kid of the goats from the flock. And she replies, what collateral will you provide? And he replies, what shall I give you? And she replies, your seal and your cords and your staff which is in your hand. And he gives them to her and comes to her, and she conceives by him. And she leaves and takes away her veil and puts on the garments of her widowhood again. Very interesting stuff going on here. Just as a general statement, how would you characterize Judah's interaction with all these Gentiles so far? What? No, what?
I'd say he was selfish prig.
I think he's pretty lax.
Disrespectful.
He's pretty fleshy.
He's pretty flashy. Yes.
He's having a problem here.
Judah is not having a good time among these Gentiles.
Well, he's kind of.
He's not not having a good time among these Gentiles.
Was that normal in that time? It sounds stupid, for prostitutes. Was that normal in the time because they slept with every single person, And later on it gets even worse with, prostitutes, with also, your cousin and what have you.
Yes, well, sexuality in the Old Testament is certainly a curious thing, and wives as well. We're going to see here in just a moment that, there certainly appears to be some double standards, for sure. And you know what?
Slave girls.
What's that?
Sleeping with slave girls.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I am not a Torah scholar per se. Yes, sir.
It's only if your wife approves, then you can have the slave girl. Right?
Apparently, yes.
I would not approve.
But
So
it never went right.
it never did go right. That is correct. I
You're
don't
saying what
recommend.
happened. It's not a suggestion. It's a description of what happened.
Yeah. Now that is true that the Bible does not ever condemn having more than one wife, unless you look at the book of 1 Timothy or 2 Timothy, where he says, hey, let a leader of the congregation be the husband of one wife. And I don't know that, the laws changed when Yeshua came. We know that they didn't. So it could be, maybe the Mormons are right, and you can have multiple wives.
Nah, the women
But
are not going to go
it's
for
just
that.
it's just not a good idea as far as I can tell.
Say that you would leave your mother and father and
Yes.
leave into your wife. He didn't say wives, he said wife.
Well, there was only one woman around. I totally agree. I think that is the intent.
And he showed us all the examples how it's horrible. And
He
horrible
did
for the
show us
wives.
plenty of examples that it never works out.
Yeah, look what
But the
happened.
Torah does say if a man has one wife that is loved and and another one that is unloved, he may not show preference to the one that he loves more than the one that's unloved. So the Torah gives guidelines for if you have multiple wives, you cannot treat them differently. Now that does not, as Angela suggested, endorse the idea. It simply says if you decide to make this stupid decision, you must behave appropriately if you get yourself into
I
this.
come to your defense.
Please do.
I do recall a scripture that says, "Be fruitful and multiply."
Yeah, in the beginning.
As far as I know, there's no restriction on the number of wives the man can have. That being said, I think it's well that a man has one wife.
Cut their neck right off.
Husband has historically been a good thing. That you can have more than one. There's no restriction other than, as you mentioned in Timothy, that if you seek to be an elder or a I forgot the other one, but then you should only have one wife. I don't know where it says.
It doesn't, as far as I know. I just
Didn't
know that it's
Jesus
not a good
say you should
idea.
have
We
one
have.
wife?
The leaders have that stipulation, so wouldn't we want that example?
I think yes. I think that is clearly that is the example that we want to
It's
follow.
more than enough.
One is more. Smarty pants. All right, no sexism. No, I think that one wife is an excellent thing.
Or the wives today will get rid of all the other ones, plus
Yes.
the husband.
Yeah, that's true.
Real
It could be
fast.
very dangerous too. So notice here this strange wording that talks about Tamar, that she covers herself with a veil and is covering herself. It literally in the Hebrew says she covered herself twice.
Yeah.
Now, whenever you see something happening twice in the Hebrew, your ears should perk up because you know something special is going on here. She is double concealed. She conceals herself, it says twice.
Pretty smart.
Because she wanted to have a baby.
Well, but think about it not on a Peshat level where it's just surface of the text, but a little bit deeper. This is Judah dealing with a bunch of Gentiles. It's also happening at the same time as Messiah, Yeshua, Joseph, has been disappeared, gone from the family. Also think about that idea that I introduced at the beginning, that this might be a prophecy of the 2,000 years since Yeshua has been gone and what has happened with Judah since then.
So who does Tamar represent?
Who does Tamar represent? An excellent question. I'm glad you asked it. Do you also have an answer?
No, I just had an idea.
Well, if you have an idea, I'd like to have it. What do you got?
The church.
The church? Interesting idea. Interesting idea. Does anyone second that notion?
I did.
Kenrianne does second that notion. Do we
Was it
have
deceiver
three?
or-
She's
Concealed.
concealed.
And she's a deceiver.
Well, you could suggest that.
Deceiver.
She
Take the
was.
whole last 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Because what they did, especially indeed like the 1200s, 1400s,
Things have been
Concealed.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
concealed. Yeah.
Just
Yeah, that's a
so-
good point.
that Judah can't recognize Jesus as the Messiah because he's been so manipulated
Sure.
into something else.
Yeah. Double concealed seems to be, it's truly hidden. And when we come up here to another section that's coming up after this one, you'll see this same idea is strengthened again about Judah being deceived, blinded, concealed. The truth is hidden from them. And Yeshua also spoke these same types of words. And we just read about this in the book of Romans.
Well, the false prophets too are also concealed, but Satan knows. He knows just reading this today, that he knows the truth about God, so that's why he can twist and conceal, double conceal, right in front of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what I was thinking, not so much the church.
Good idea.
Almost like meeting with Satan.
Interesting.
There's it's showing an interesting concept here where temple cult prostitutes were common during those times, cult prostitute worship. A zona, as it says here in Hebrew, where it says calls her a prostitute. A zona is a temple cult prostitute, and Yehuda seemed to be very familiar with the customs, and also Tamar, of what went on in these temple prostitute situations. They had temples, and they worshiped pagan
God.
Elohim, pagan mighty one.
Yeah.
And you can see that, as this goes on, that she knew what kind of garments to wear. So Judah would think, this isn't somebody I really know, obviously.
Right.
And as the text goes on, there's more to be revealed here. The concept of the pledge and the kid is very interesting. Where in the kid, it's interesting because Isaiah 65:11 talks about not worshiping the pagan deity God. Okay, I know you've heard that one before. You've heard of God.
In our Bibles, it
right?
changes it to Gad so as not to confuse us.
Exactly. You're right. A lot of
It does.
places it does change it. It's kind of interesting that the kid is God-D. Okay, if we say in Hebrew father, if I say my father, V, I put that E sound on the end. So this kid in Hebrew, it's kind of weird, I will send it God D, my God, from this pledge. In other words, you had to pay this zona or cult prostitute something, right? And what did they do with this? So he pledged an animal. God is a deity of fortune or wealth. So,
Well, that seems to tie back into this place of these noble family and the wealth that was listed in the names that we read at the beginning of this chapter.
right.
That does seem to tie in. Also consider that a goat is used as an instrument of trickery. Have we seen this before?
Isn't that what Satan uses for his? Is a goat. Like that's
Well,
what the
you have
pagans
goat
did.
demons and
Yeah.
stuff like that, but I'm thinking more along the lines of how did Jacob trick his father with a goat? With a goat. And think about also on the Day of Atonement with the scapegoat and then they have two goats. And remember also that there is a red cord tied around the neck of the scapegoat that is then brought back and tied onto the door of the temple, just like Angela was talking about a minute ago. So we got all these themes are tying together. We got a goat, we got this red cord, which is about to come up at the end of this section, and we got interesting parallels here. Now, what do you think about these items that she asks for in collateral? What do these items signify?
What are the chords?
That is the literal Hebrew word for cord. Now, other people have your different translations will translate it differently, but in the Hebrew it literally says cord, and so or also threads. Now, so you might get the idea of garments, perhaps, because I can't think of anything
Like
else.
a coat?
Maybe a coat,
In some places it's translated belt.
belt,
Yeah.
cord.
Something
Okay.
that you tie around your garment.
Okay, so think about that. Okay, so if you think about it as a type of clothing or as a clothing accessory, what does a belt or a cord do?
Compass.
It can bind you. It can keep your clothes on. It can keep your robe closed so that you are not revealing yourself.
Didn't help her any.
Yeah. Now, the signet. What is the signet?
It identifies him.
Seal?
Yes.
It is a seal, like a king's ring that he takes off and puts in the wax, to put his mark on it. It signifies this is authentic, this is real, this is my signet that identifies my sign of
That's
authority.
like giving somebody your PIN code. Why would he do that to a prostitute?
That is a very interesting idea. It seems like, and his staff, what is the staff? What do you think that represents?
Well, he's like the leader of his flock, and that's like how
Your
he-
protection?
Yeah.
Exactly. So we've got seems like these really crucial, significant items are given to a prostitute to...
It's almost like you're going to get caught without your identity, without your protection, and with your pants down.
I think that's a good idea, Keith.
You gotta remember now, this was in the moment he wanted some, right? And she said, "You gotta give me something here," and that's what those were the possessions he had with him.
Because he was so...
And then he had his signet ring on the cord. He said, "Okay, well," because he was planning on getting every one of those back, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but who would you give your credit cards and bank book to?
A prostitute.
Well, you might say, "I'll hold on to your wallet," and you'll say, "Okay."
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I'm kind of sensing here, listening to you all, that he hadn't gotten over his grieving. This guy was really hurting still.
From the loss of his wife.
Right.
It says that he was consoled and
Right.
goes up to shear his sheep, but
he
maybe
was in a
he
bad
was in a
place
bad
here.
position. Yeah, absolutely.
And anyone willing to give up those things, I mean, those are the identifiers. Those are his identifiers
Yeah.
of, who he is.
Absolutely.
But was that a play from her then, or
I'm sorry?
did he just give that to her?
Well,
from,
she
okay,
said,
you know what,
you got to
whatever
get, because you
want,
say you're going to pay me later.
Yeah.
This is like Wimpy saying, I want hamburgers for payment on Tuesday.
Yeah.
But did she play him to say, I need sign later on in the story?
No,
of
he
course, it was
offered
from-
them.
Yeah.
I mean, she
No,
didn't.
said,
Well, she asked for him. She wanted a
She said, "What can I
pledge.
get you for
She
a
wanted
pledge?"
security.
She said,
Right.
Okay,
And
so
later
yes,
on,
you
she
are
used that
correct.
against him.
what are you going to give me?
Yeah, he says, what do you want? And she says, well, I'll take your
Yeah.
significant items. Now, backing up briefly, you got this mysterious Gentile woman who is double concealed and takes the authority, protection, and covering of Judah.
Oh.
Yeah,
What do we have here?
right.
Huh?
Counterfeit.
And now, interestingly, Yosef was talking about the Noza or the Naza, the prostitute. Okay. Now, a lot of if you look in your Strongs, it's going to talk about somebody fornication or being a harlot or something like that. If you look at all of the occurrences of that word throughout the Torah and the prophets and the writings, it is almost exclusively. There are only a couple, like 4 times, where this is actually referring to an actual prostitute. In almost all of the other instances, it's talking to the people of Elohim prostituting themselves to other gods by serving them, by worshiping them, by incorporating those religious practices into their worship of the Father. That is almost always how that word is used. Harlotry. You've heard the prophets talking about you sons of harlots and you're committing adultery and are prostituting yourselves to other gods. This is the way that this word is used almost exclusively, except a few times in the first book of the Torah where we actually have a couple of prostitutes or someone pretending to be a prostitute. So if Tamar is a picture of the Gentile church, who is kind of a prostitute,
Well, appears that way to Judah.
appears that way to Judah. There's an interesting, but is there a double entendre there? Double meaning?
Yeah.
She appears that way to Judah.
And she's acting that way.
She's acting that
That's what
way.
she did.
Okay, interestingly enough. And what does she take from Judah? She takes significant blessings from God from him. Now, we know, looking at just our recent history, that our brother Judah has just recently, in the last 70 years, gotten his land back. Some of it. He's fighting for it tooth and nail. And Joseph was just talking about how the rest of the world is passing, divestment and sanctions against them and trying to punish them, and is on the side of their enemies who are rabid lunatics who do not want peace and just want to kill everybody. This is divine, obviously. Divine hatred without a cause, as we can see here in the story of Joseph and in the story of Yeshua being hated without a cause. The rabbis themselves will tell you, why was the temple destroyed? Because of hatred without a cause, unjust hatred. That's what their conclusion is, why the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. So Joseph hated without a cause. Yeshua hated without a cause. Our Jewish brothers today hated without a cause. And we've got them finally coming back into their own, okay? They've got their own land. They've got some powerful military weapons. They're able to protect themselves. They're doing well. God is blessing them tremendously. But what had been their lot prior to that? What had been their situation in life prior to this establishment of the state of Israel?
Were they scattered?
Yeah.
Exile, persecution, slaughter. Millions of them. We know that Hitler, just before they got their state, killed at least 6 or 7 million of them. In Russia, you can double that number. With the pogroms, Stalin,
yeah.
Lenin, they killed almost 15 million Jews throughout the Russian provinces in those people in the East. You know how there were forced conversions in the Middle Ages with the Inquisition. And many surmise, and I believe it's probably true, that Christopher Columbus was probably a Jew who was fleeing persecution under Ferdinand and Isabella. And the history of our brother Judah has been one of rabid persecution by the church and by anybody, just any old buddy. It has only been in the last 70 years that they have started to have some semblance of normalcy in their lives and some sense of protection.
By the church, you refer to the Catholic order.
Mostly, yes.
Because I don't consider the Catholic order the church, personally.
Well, but for most of its history, well, if you want to count, okay, so you got maybe the original faith of Yeshua and the disciples lasted. There was already apostasy, and the Apostle John was writing about it. There was already being apostates in the first century. When Constantine sets up the Roman state church, then you've basically got Catholicism, and that rules until 1500. So you've got at least 1,200 years out of the last 2,000 where the Catholic Church was it, aside from anybody who discovered the truth and they were killed by the Catholic Church. Now, if we want to say, well, that's the Catholic Church, but you know how many people in American churches? There aren't hardly any churches left in Europe, but in America's churches, you know how many have signed on to the divestments and sanctions movement against Israel? Most of them are on the side of the Palestinians and say that Yeshua, Jesus, was a Palestinian.
No, he wasn't. A lie.
That's what many churches teach.
And that means a Philistine.
Pretty much. Yeah, Palestinian is a Philistine, absolutely. Jesus was a Philistine? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So, we've got anti-Semitism run amok.
It's key in the Torah. We have in Deuteronomy 28, 29, 30, 31, where it lays out the blessings and the curses, okay, the concept to the people of Israel, to all of the 12 tribes. And Yahweh says, this is how I will bless you if you will follow my commandments. Just as Yeshua said, if you love me, you will do my commandments.
Mm-hmm.
So the blessings are laid out. And then we have this next section where the curses. Cursed will you be in the city. Cursed will you be in birth. Cursed, it goes on and on.
Your kneading bowl and your trough, yeah.
Exactly. So the concept of what happens to now the descendancy, through the descendancy, which still involves a lot of the 12 tribes, because when the 10 tribes were dispersed, there were a lot of people out of those 10 tribes that came down into Judah. during the Assyrian captivity.
Right.
So Judah is still a mix of all of the 12 tribes.
Yeah.
But most of the rest of those 10 tribes are scattered throughout the earth, which we believe
To be
the church.
the church,
essentially,
mostly,
a
yeah.
lot of them descendants of the church.
Mm-hmm.
But the concept of what's going on here goes all the way back to Judah, where Judah, Yehuda in Hebrew means Yahweh Da. Judah is supposed to be a praise to Yahweh. That's his name. That's what it means, a praise to Yahweh. And here, Yehuda, Judah, what's he doing? He's going to a cult temple prostitute that worships demons of, every name you could possibly think of, and giving and paying this woman who he thinks is going to give him sex, for whatever, give him his total identity. I mean, and here we see the concept of Yisrael, or Judah, doing the same thing today, even though the people of Judah have gone through all of this persecution throughout all of the ages, but still Israel, in the majority, is still spiritually unregenerate and still rejecting Yahweh.
Mm-hmm.
So, I love your defense of my descendancy, but on the other hand, you can see clearly what Yahweh is doing with the people still, because as long as Judah rejects Yahweh, Judah will be put to death. It's as simple as that. Until the final remnant, and thus all Israel shall
Absolutely,
be saved.
absolutely. And there are people of two persuasions out there in regards to the modern state of Israel right now. Many believe that that Israel is blessed by Elohim, and that he will be protected, divinely protected, and given great victory. There is another camp that says that the current state of Israel is apostate, and most of them will be destroyed in a great conflagration between all these Muslim nations around them.
If they don't fall on
That
their face.
only a remnant of the current state of Israel will be delivered.
I have heard that, and I don't know, I just heard this, that there's the majority of the population is secular. Is that
they
true?
are, very much.
Yeah.
I would liken it very much to America.
Yeah.
It's very much an Americanized kind of place, it seems like to me. There are very many secular people. They have a strong homosexual community. They have one of the largest gay, lesbian, transgender parades to happen every year. The city of Tel Aviv is very modern and chic and worldly. Now you have a small percentage that are intensely religious. I think that just like in America, I think it's a very similar place as far as if you want to take the spiritual temperature, it would be very, very similar. Now I don't know where you fall on that line of Judah is protected by God and they'll all be saved and they'll get a great victory. I don't know. I have no idea.
The prophets speak clearly that, in Zechariah chapter 13, it's very clear. He says 2/3 of the people will be cut off. He says, I will bring a third through the fire and refine them as iron is refined and silver. In Zechariah chapter 14, where we come to the very end of the tribulation period, you see half the city is taken captive of Jerusalem and the surrounding areas, and only half the city is left, and then it goes into the prophets speak very clearly of
judgment.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Unfortunately.
Coming.
And that is why I think that the prayer that we said at the beginning is so important in looking at Daniel chapter 9, for an example of saying, look, man, and I know that many of us in this room who have begun to examine these roots that we have in the Torah, in the Tanakh, in the writings, and the prophets, and kind of starting to tie this all together. I think that the heart of it really is that many of us are seeing that the end times are approaching very quickly. And I think that it is a spirit of repentance that has been granted, and that we are seeking to pursue a spirit of repentance, just like Daniel did in Daniel chapter 9. I suggest you read Daniel chapter 9 every day, because Daniel is pouring out his heart and saying,
Yeah.
we have been wicked and rebellious, and all of our fathers have lied and cheated and stealed, and we have not obeyed your commandments, and everything horrible that is happening to us is totally justified. You are right in doing so. And he goes off on a litany and saying, we deserve this. You have done exactly as you said you would, and nothing like this has ever happened on the face of the planet. Your people are being wiped out, and you said it would happen, and you are a Elohim who keeps his word. And you are righteous and just, but please, have mercy. Spare your people. And I think that that is the heart of this, I don't know if you want to call it a movement or whatever, of people who are really seeking the Father in as much spirit and truth as they can muster, because the Spirit is witnessing to each of you that the time is short and the time for repentance is now. In fact, if you want to go back to the beginning of the Gospels, we should all of us be saying, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is right at the door. That's what we're doing. It's exactly what we're doing. We are repenting because the kingdom of heaven is right at the door. It is right there. We all sense it. You don't even need to be a Christian. You don't need to be a follower of the Father to sense it. You can read it on your newspaper. The world at large knows what's going on. Are they repenting? No.
No.
There's only a small section of the followers of the Messiah that are actually repenting. Keith?
That is the gospel of the kingdom right there.
That is the gospel of the kingdom right there.
Yeshua hadn't done anything yet. I mean, no one really knew the intention that he was going to give his life. He was teaching them to go out and give that gospel.
Right.
The kingdom is near. Repent. And then what's going to happen in the kingdom? Well, if you fit into the kingdom, great things will happen, and you will be kings and
You will be
prophets
saved.
with me. You will serve with me
Yeah.
when my Father's kingdom comes.
Right.
So,
But
we
what did
had-
John the Baptizer say to the religious elite? The axe is laid to the root of the trees. Don't think that you can say, we know God.
Right.
We are God's
Right. We're
children.
in.
We're in.
Right.
We got our
We got
tickets
it.
punched. We're good to go.
Yeah.
You don't want to be.
We get the law.
Just like Paul, we read about in Paul in Romans, saying, rather fear and work out your salvation with fear and trembling, and don't take heed, because you've been grafted in. It seems like he's talking about you've been grafted into this tree in a rather precarious position. Don't be boasting against the branches or thinking that you're cool. Don't think of yourself more highly than you should. So this is the message that we're talking about today, is the kingdom of heaven is at hand. We are repenting and removing all forms of idolatry and false worship and all kinds of messed up stuff that we've had in our lives and our theology for so many thousands of years that it's coming around. I apologize for going off on a long rabbit trail. Let us return to this, and we'll kind of move closer towards the end here. Looking at Genesis chapter 38, verses 20 through 26, let's take a look at this. And Judah sends this kid of the goats with his shepherd, the Edolamite, to get his collateral from the woman. Yet he did not find her. And he asks the men of the place, "Where's the harlot? By the 2 springs on the road." And they answer, "No harlot has been in this place." And he, the Edolamite, returns to Judah and says, "I didn't find her." And the men of the place say, "No harlot has been in this place." And Judah says, "She may keep them, lest we come into contempt. Behold, I sent this kid, and you did not find her." Now about 3 months later, Judah is informed, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar commits prostitution, and behold, she is pregnant by her prostitutions." And Judah answers, "Bring her out and burn her." And she is brought out. Yet she sends word to Judah answering, "I am pregnant by the man belonging to these." She also answers, "Identify, please." Who these are, the seal and the cord and the staff. And Judah recognizes them as his own and answers, "Tamar is more righteous than I, for I did not give her to Shelah, my son." And Judah does not have any further relations with her. Now this is loaded. This is absolutely loaded. We've already discussed the inferences about this goat and how this goat of trickery is used. Now, what allusion may be drawn from the idea that this Gentile woman has taken Judah's signet and his covering and his staff? We already kind of addressed that. Now, why is Tamar accused of prostitution? Isn't she free from the law of the husband, as we were just reading about in Romans the other day? If she is a widow and her husband died and she was married to the second son and then he died and she's now a widow in her father's house, why is Judah saying she's a prostitute? Why are people saying she's prostituting and she should be burned? And that's my next question. Why would she be burned instead of stoned? A woman who commits adultery is to be stoned, not burned.
Yeah, but was it because she was in the occult? Prostitution in the...
Well, that wasn't in the Torah either.
No, she wasn't. But I mean, they thought she was.
Well, they thought she was, but I mean, the Torah talks about people who practice, idolatry or witchcraft or something, and they would be stoned.
Well, does anyone get burned in the Torah? I don't
Yes.
remember that. Who?
Yes, we'll get to that in just a second.
The man should have been out.
There's one specific category of a woman who will be burned.
A witch.
Which?
No, it's not a witch.
Burn her to the
Okay,
stake.
look.
Fryer.
So answer my question, if you may. Why is she accused of being a prostitute? If her husband is dead, why isn't she free from the law of the husband?
Because she identified herself as a prostitute in their culture, for one.
She turned up.
Well, this is not the kingdom of Judah. There's the rules of Yehovah are not in play here. This is in the land of Canaan, in a Gentile land where prostitution is commonplace.
Well, like you said, this woman covered herself as a prostitute.
Sure.
She must have told somebody
Yeah.
She must have told somebody what?
that she pretended to be a prostitute.
So, yeah, but what I'm saying is they don't stone prostitutes in this land.
Yeah, but the people of the land aren't asking for her to be stoned. Judah's asking for her to be stoned.
Well, no, I'm talking about we're not talking about the stoning necessarily or the burning. We're saying, why is she even being called a prostitute, and why are they? Isn't she free?
I thought she
Just-
needed to,
Well,
to
she
marry
doesn't
the
have a
third
husband.
the third son.
She has a baby bump.
She's conceived. I mean, she's with child, so.
Well, why
But-
make the jump to prostitution?
But there's identifiers, there's other identifiers before this in the Hebrew.
Right.
Okay.
Go
First
for
of
it.
all, she's called a zona, which
Right.
is called prostitute
Right.
earlier. Then there's the word kadosh, okay, or kadosh, in her case, kadashah, which is feminine,
Right.
which is identified in English as a shrine prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
Now, kadosh is a very interesting word. In the book of Revelation, it says in chapter 4 that before the throne of Yahweh, those incredible creations with the wings and everything, before the throne say constantly, Kadosh, 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 Yahweh, El Shaddai. Constantly, 24 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
So, if Yahweh is called Kadosh, why is she called Kadosh? So, in a lot of cases, you'll see that word translated holy.
Yeah.
Holy, but that comes from the
Separate.
Hellenization
Yeah.
of the halo, Greek
Sure.
nimbus halo of sun worship.
Sure.
The word in Hebrew means to be set apart. So kadosh means set apart. Now the question is, in regards to a person or anything, what are you set apart to?
Mm-hmm.
She's a zona. She's set apart to whomever she's worshiping in this temple cult prostitution situation. Where on the other hand, we are set apart to Yahweh.
Right.
We are kadosh in that sense, and that's why there's in the Hebrew it reads totally different.
Yeah.
Was she a prostitute?
She was not a prostitute.
About your question about the difference between stoning or burning, well, stoning is, when you're talking about this time in history, the law had not been introduced. The law came by Moses later.
Well, that's
Right.
true, but the
And
forefathers.
stoning came through after the law was introduced.
Okay, so this is interesting then, because there would be no law or Torah regarding the killing or burning of this woman. So where's Judah getting this from?
Well, there had to be there had to be information throughout the descendancy of the seed, because why would one son supposed to be, take over the wife? If one son dies, then the next one in line takes over.
The Levirate.
Right.
Right.
And even with Yeshua is asked the question, if the
7 brothers.
The 7 brothers. So in heaven, who's going to be, the husband of this woman,
Right.
of this wife? So there was obviously information.
Yeah, the
throughout
Torah
the ages.
is very much alive prior to the giving of the
Right.
law from Moses. You can see it in the lives of the patriarchs. You can see it in Adam and Eve. You can see it all the way from the beginning, way before Moses arrived.
Right.
I mean, you got Noah separating the animals from clean and unclean. You got circumcision. You got the Sabbath keeping.
Well,
you
because
got
God designated the animals for clean and not clean. In itself.
Before Moses even talked about it, absolutely. So I think what's interesting here is that it's probably my idea about why she was accused of being a harlot or committing adultery or something like that is because she was betrothed to Shelah.
Mm-hmm.
She was anticipating becoming the wife of Shelah,
And
his
that's the whole
third.
problem.
What's that?
He lied to her.
He lied to her and he withheld his third son, Shelah. Why did he do that?
It doesn't say.
Afraid Shelah would die too.
He was afraid that Shelah would die. He might have thought, this woman Tamar is cursed. Every time I give her one of my sons, they end up dead. I'm not giving her my third son. But he had made that promise, and he did not fulfill his promise. Now, she would have been betrothed to Shelah. And so in the Hebrew culture, if you were betrothed to someone, it's like you're married. So you could technically be stoned for being an adulteress or a prostitute, whoring, if you were in a betrothal period. And apparently I believe that that's possibly what was happening here. But what's curious to me is that he talks about burning her instead of stoning her. And what's interesting is that if you look in the book of Leviticus, there's only one woman who, and this is the case only for the daughter of a Levite, who is found to be in harlotry. They will be burned, not stoned. So this is the daughter of a priest is burned and not stoned. What does that suggest to you? That he says burn her. Now a normal Hebrew woman would be stoned to death because of prostituting herself and whoring herself if she's betrothed to his son Shelah. But he says burn her, which is the punishment for a priest's daughter who commits harlotry.
Does he see himself as a priest?
Does he see
Or
himself
close
as a
to?
priest? That's certainly an interesting idea, but it's almost kind of hinting at the idea that Tamar herself is from a priestly line somehow. Or is it a presaging idea about the tie-in with Yeshua, the Messiah, being a high priest after the order of Melchizedek? Possibly. Some connection there. It's an interesting thing that he says burn her.
Well, there's another prostitute that gets burned
Who's that?
at the end of the book.
The great harlot.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Who might also be representative of the same thing.
Who the
So
great
again,
harlot,
three.
the great prostitute, who is
And they have
also
priests all over the place now, don't they?
indeed. That's an interesting idea.
Same.
Interesting idea.
They should have burned him instead of her.
So now, well, he certainly fears, you know what? You're right, and his attitude does reflect that.
Yeah,
He
dying.
said, "She is more righteous than I am, because I did not keep my oath. She took matters into her own hand." Okay. Now, what does that suggest to you about his attitude?
His evil conscience.
He's repentant.
He is becoming repentant. Yes,
Conscience is hurting.
he is repenting. In fact, it's just so patently obvious. Those are the exact words that the Hebrew sources tell us that Judah spoke to his father when he held up his brother Joseph's bloody coat and said, "Pray, identify." That's exactly the words that she used to him.
And
Pray,
he knew why
identify. He knew why.
right away.
He knew why. Yes, he did. And he says she is more righteous than I. This shows us, I believe, that It's also looking at that big picture of maybe being a picture of what has happened with our brother Judah over the last 2,000 years. Just a microcosm of a bigger picture that he does repent and he recognizes, I was wrong.
But he doesn't realize the reason that his son died was because he wouldn't give the Tamar any kids.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
God looked frowned on that, because it's like if you're going to have sex with her, then you don't go spill your seed somewhere else
Sure.
in the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you withhold a child from her, or even withhold sex from a woman that you were married to,
That's
you
dangerous.
could be killed for it. All right, chop them up.
No, it's interesting that the rabbis actually say that did not want to impregnate Tamar because she would lose her girlish figure if she became pregnant. She would, lose her attractiveness.
Do you think that matters?
That's not what the Bible says. I said that's what the rabbis say. The rabbis indicate that the evil that did was he would not get his wife pregnant because he thought it would ruin her looks.
I think he was worried that instead of the blessing going to him, the blessing would probably have transferred to his offspring.
Yeah,
would have been considered
exactly.
his brother's offspring.
Yes.
No, I'm not talking about Onan and why he spilled his seed on the ground. I'm talking about the first son and why it says he was killed. It doesn't give any reason. The rabbis have speculated, I don't want to get her pregnant because it'll ruin her looks.
No, it said he was an evil man. Wrong.
Yeah, it said he was.
Yeah, well, if you inverse the letters of his name, it says he's evil. Now, the rabbis have speculated about why that might be, and I was just throwing that out to you. Now, the second son, Onan, yeah, he was not being gracious and giving children to, he's like, these aren't going to be my kids, and I ain't doing it.
Right.
Which was, was the right thing to do according to the Torah. If you got a brother who dies without children,
But he didn't
that's the
want
right
him.
thing to do. But he didn't want to do that. He
So
didn't
he
want to
ended
be.
up dying, right?
He did not want to show brotherly love.
That's what you get, brother.
That's what you get, brother. Okay, so moving forward, this is Genesis 38, 27 through 30. And at the time of her bearing, this is Tamar getting ready to have these children. Behold, twins are in her belly. And during the birthing, one child is putting out a hand, and the midwife ties on his hand a scarlet thread, saying, "This one is first." And it happened that as his hand is withdrawn, then behold, his brother comes forth, and the midwife proclaims, "What? You have broken forth. On you be the breach." And she calls his name Perez, or Perez. It's not Mexican. Perez. And afterward comes his brother, who had on his hand the scarlet thread. And she calls his name Zerah. Interesting stuff.
Doesn't that sound like those other twins?
It does. But you know what's interesting? And interesting that you bring that up, because, the twins in the biblical record are fairly rare. You know that in this case right here, we had twins, Jacob and Esau,
Right.
and that's spelled a certain way in the Hebrew, and
And then one of the hands
maybe
came
somebody
out.
who has their Hebrew translation can tell me what
Then
that
the hand
is.
went out, came back, and the other one out.
Yes. Now, what's interesting is that in the case of Jacob and Esau, you've got that word twins,
Yeah.
and it's spelled a certain way, and this word is the same word, but it's missing a letter. Now, this is in a Sefer Torah scroll, indicating something is going on here. It's the same word, but there's a letter missing.
Which letter?
Let us take a look. I don't know if this Hebrew interlinear translation that I have here.
I'm looking, which verse has the...
That would be verse 27.
Okay, so verse 27 has it, and then where is the other verse? And
That would be in... I will find that for you. I just wanted to call that to your attention, and maybe we can take a look at that and see what might be the idea there, because it was pointed out to me. Toimim is twins.
there it is.
Taomeh. Right.
But do you have
The reference back to Jacob and Esau?
Yeah.
I do not. I can find that for you.
Just wanted to look.
Yeah, I want to look at it too.
Mine says Ta'om. Or is it, how do you say it?
Ta'omei,
It's, well, the first one is
Genesis 25. Genesis 25 is Jacob and Esau's story.
okay.
And so we'll look at Genesis 25. I just want to see about this twins thing here.
Okay, so right around 2 nations are in the womb.
2 nations are in your womb. Twins, that's verse 24. Genesis 25:24.
Okay, and the word is Tomim.
Tomim.
Yeah, is the word.
Now, you might have to have a Sefer Torah scroll where the scribal marks are still in there in order to see that difference. And I saw it online, that you can see that in this case, in the Sefer Torah scroll where the scribal marks still are, that this word twins, one of the letters is missing, and I wish I had taken note of that.
The
And
olive is missing in the first reference to it.
okay.
As the first one is Tomim, and the second one is, well, the olive is silent in the second word, so it's still pronounced the same.
Yeah, it's still pronounced the same.
And that's not unusual in Hebrew.
Well, some scholar thought it was significant, and I thought I'd bring it out. And if we could find it, we'd take a look at it and see what maybe letter was missing and maybe what might that signify. I'm not sure. It was just an idea.
Okay.
So something to think about. Now,
So, I got a question.
yes, sorry.
Going back to their names, and this is something that John was touching on. It seemed like the midwife named them. It's
Yeah.
there was no thought. It's what happened when they were born
Yeah,
or something.
absolutely.
And then
Right.
now I'm to learn that Perez means bursting into, and
Breaking
then-
forth,
and
something like
Sarah
that.
is or
Shining.
Sarah is sunrise.
Yeah, the bright shining or something like that.
You
Yeah.
know? So, but yeah, the mother had no say. All of a sudden, the midwife says, "Hey, this is what happened during the birth. I called them this," and they go with that.
Yeah,
you know?
she was
It's
probably
like-
out of it. She wasn't paying
Makes
attention.
sense.
But it's the names. Let's back up just a little bit about the scarlet thread. What about the scarlet thread? If you think about the times you know of in the Bible regarding the scarlet thread, what's the first one that you're aware of?
Yom Kippur, with the day of atonement.
Well,
Are you talking about like,
just any place that you.
Jericho.
Jericho with Rahab
yeah, Brian,
is got that scarlet thread.
and Jacob and Esau, of course.
Jacob and Esau, was there a scarlet thread with Jacob and Esau?
No, it's the hand
No,
came
just
out.
the hand came out.
Okay, so we got this scarlet thread, we got Rahab scarlet thread, and we have the scarlet ribbon or thread or whatever that was placed around the neck of the goat on Yom Kippur, the scapegoat, that was then taken off and put on the door of the temple, and it would supposedly turn white
Right.
to indicate that the sins of the people had been removed for the year or whatever. Unintentional sins, by the way.
Got
So,
turned white.
what significance do you attach to a scarlet thread?
I would identify it to whatever you want to identify to, like somebody's name or who came first, or
Well, this would be the first instance in the Torah of the scarlet thread. The second instance would be the one with Rahab, and the third would be rabbinical lore regarding the scarlet thread being tied on the door of the temple.
Okay.
But as far as we've also got the scarlet thread that is used in the special ceremony of the red heifer. What do you think of when you're thinking about these instances of a scarlet thread? What's the significance of a scarlet thread? Think about Rahab. What did the scarlet thread do?
It marked her house so that it didn't get destroyed.
It marked her house so that it didn't get destroyed. would you tie that into Passover?
Yeah.
I think so. You could almost see
Because of the red around the door.
red around the door. Certainly, so there's not a scarlet thread, but it's a scarlet marking of some kind, which is real similar to what happened with Rahab. And then on the goat, the marking is an indication of the cleansing, which kind of ties in again a little bit. But what's interesting is that you might think that, remember who's got the thread? Which of these two children has the thread on his hand?
Zara.
Probably one.
Zerah. Zerah has the thread. Now you might attach significance to that. But who is actually the descendant of one of the ancestors of the Messiah? It's not Zerah, it's Perez. Is that slightly confusing? It was to me, because I thought, well, if Zerah has a scarlet thread around his hand, then that seems to indicate salvation of some kind, and it kind of marks it out for me. But then it was actually Perez that was in the line of the descendants of Yeshua.
But he didn't.
Yes? Okay. I just thought it was certainly interesting. And these names, breaking forth and bright shining, those names are pretty significant, I'm sure. But very curious. What significance you could attach to them, I am not totally certain about that. So again...
Maybe it meant that he was special, because remember with Moses, when they said that he was good, it goes back to what was good was when Yahweh created light, so there was obviously light when Moses was born. So if Perez is the same thing, there's something special about that child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it would come back to the Zerah, the seed.
The Zerah, the
Yeah,
seed.
Now Zerah there is Zerah. Okay, so it's not Zerah.
It's close.
It's
Yeah.
close, but it's still different.
Do you have an idea? What do you got?
So there's the seed that comes through parents
Okay. Yeah.
to all the way to Yeshua.
Sure. What do you got, Angela?
The cat on the word.
Yeah.
Cat on the word.
Okay. Well, there's two. There's two comings. There's once when he comes to save.
Oh.
So you got the first baby, but it's just hand. So you've got the salvation. I think the red thread represents salvation.
Yep.
Then you have the second coming, which is going to be much more
Breaking out.
dramatic. Yeah,
Yes.
breaking forth or whatever.
I like it. In fact, I heard that.
Oh.
That was an excellent idea, and that did come from another Messianic rabbi that I listened to talking about this, and he said that he believes that the hand coming forth with the red ribbon tied around it indicates is symbolic of the first coming of the Messiah, Yeshua. But then he goes away, and he disappears. And then he comes back out, it breaks forth. You see what I'm saying? So it's like these two children represent the one embodiment of the Messiah. Tying again with the red ribbon and, going out and coming back in and, disappearing for a little while and then, breaking forth. And that's the line of the descendants of the Messiah. Very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff indeed.
If the red represents dam, which is blood in Hebrew,
Yep.
the concept of Messiah, Isaiah 53 identifies Messiah that he was an Asham. Okay? In other words, this is what he paid for. He paid for the blood guilt, Asham, meaning blood guilt of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe that ties in.
Yeah,
with
I think that ties in, absolutely. So now...
Isaiah 53.
Yeah. So what prophetic significance do you believe attaches to this little digression in the story, in the middle of the story of Joseph? And we also considered what is happening in Egypt, that Joseph is a type of the Messiah. Do you believe that this does, as I suggested at the beginning for you to think about, do you think that this digression about Judah might represent the history over the last 2,000 years? Do you see any connections there? Think that's a valid argument or a valid idea? Is there enough significance to the details in this story to suggest something like that to you?
Or maybe not in the last 2,000 years, maybe even bigger in scope than that.
I would definitely say even bigger in scope. But do you see parallels
It's
between?
like a mini story.
Yeah.
That's the whole concept of Israel's rebellion or prostituting herself to other deities, other Elohims, instead of following Yahweh. But then, of course, repentance.
Yeah.
In his
Absolutely.
case.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's a very interesting digression. And then we go right back to the story of Joseph in the next chapter to get back to the narrative and see. And I think that we'll probably go ahead and stop here. And then we'll go forward into the story of Joseph to continue with that story next time. And it just gets more and more fascinating, and more details come out that are just really, really significant. But this digression into about Judah and Tamar is certainly weird, just stuck into the narrative there. But consider it, and if you guys have other ideas when you come back next week, think about this some more, and let's bring it up. Let's review, for a minute before we start next week, and see if you guys have any other ideas. This coming week, do read Genesis 39, because that's where we'll be for next time. And this is going to be really good stuff. I've already started my notes and my research for the next section. In fact, it's already partially done, but you can't see it. I'm really excited about these next parts coming up. They're so significant. Let us pray, and we will adjourn ourselves and begin to have some food.